From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
And good evening to you all. I'm Jessica Ralston. Welcome to this Tuesday edition of Open Line. Tonight we're talking about a topic that has really a lot of people talking right now. It's the Adrian Peterson NFL child abuse scandal and the latest on that, and what you think is the difference between child abuse and good old form of discipline. Of course, he is expected to return to the field with the Minnesota Vikings this Sunday. Yesterday, he said, hey, look, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not a child abuser. All of this after he was caught hitting his 4-year-old little boy with a homemade switch. And, of course, there were bruises and pictures taken as a result. Has a lot of people fired up. Now, joining us as our guest tonight is Jennifer Drake-Croft. She is the Associate Director of the Family Center. Thanks for being here.
Of course.
And we're going to talk with you in just a minute about what the purpose is of the Family Center and how you can get involved and help folks out. But first, News Channel 5's Andrea Klein-Thomas has hit the streets this week to really talk to people about what they think about this controversy. And so here's a look at what a lot of you had to say.
I'm from the South. Whipping is, we do that all the time.
You read the story. Adrian Peterson, star running back for the Minnesota Vikings, is charged with child abuse.
Parents are entitled to discipline their children as they see fit.
Pictures surface showing the scars on his 4-year-old son after Peterson admittedly hit him with a switch or tree branch. Today alone, nearly 2,000 viewers weighed in on News Channel 5's Facebook page when we asked if you could relate to what Peterson described as a form of discipline. Owen Gregory said, when I was a kid, my parents made me pick my own switch. Elaine Tidwell said, I'm a firm believer in discipline, but I would never mark up my child's leg like that, especially at age 4. Chelsea Dixon added, quit being your child's friend and start being a parent. While Kayla Long said, I believe in spankings, but not to the point of drawing blood too much, especially for a 4-year-old.
We try to provide techniques that are loving and nurturing and what science is telling us to be the most effective.
Parent and community educator Jennifer Martin saw the same images.
I see a scared child and I also see a scared parent.
The Family Center's parenting classes never advocate for corporal punishment, like spanking, as a form of discipline. Martin says it does not teach good behavior. Instead, it instills fear.
It really prevents them from being able to reason through the next time they have to make that behavior choice.
But parents often do what they say straighten them out as children.
I've asked him not to talk about the facts or anything just because we want the district attorney's office to look into the case.
But as Peterson is learning, it could be considered child abuse and lead to charges.
1,500 comments now.
Wow.
Martin wants parents to at least consider other methods she says are more effective.
And again, Jennifer Drake-Croft is here to represent the Family Center tonight, and I'm sure you all have been talking about this one a whole lot because it really, really hits home. So again, explain. I know we saw a little from the Family Center in Andrea's story, but what the mission is, what the purpose is, what kind of services you provide.
Definitely. So here at the Family Center, we're a child abuse prevention agency. We've been serving Middle Tennessee for 30 years, and we primarily provide parent education classes. So we work with pretty much with vulnerable populations. So we work with parents who are incarcerated, parents who are struggling with substance abuse issues and are in recovery, and we work with families who are referred by the legal system to our community-based class. We also provide trainings to the public about the effects of child abuse and neglect.
Okay, and what does the Family Center define as child abuse?
Yeah, that's a tricky and complicated topic.
Absolutely.
Well, we are really there to support the whole family. We look at child abuse and neglect as a cycle. And so a lot of the parents that we serve, they have a very vast trauma history, and they're parenting the way that they know how to parent. We often say that folks, you know, a lot of times you'll go through a class that teaches you how to give birth. And at the most, you know, you're in labor for, I was in labor for 3 days, but I would say that that's the most that you'd be in labor.
Let's hope so. And
but you know, you're given this training on how to do that, but then you're not given training on how to rear your children, right. You know, which is arguably, well, I think it's the most important job you're ever going to do.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we work to educate parents and and we look at child abuse and neglect as being really anything that is the commission or omission of abuse. You know, it's not only physically assaulting your child or sexually exploiting your child. It's also neglecting your child, so not providing them the basic, their basic concrete needs and also their emotional needs. And so a lot of the parents that we're working with, they're hurting, right? They don't want to abuse and neglect their kids. But they are parenting the way that they know how.
Right, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you. And then we're going to get to some callers. Philip's on line 1. Hi there, Philip. What do you have to say tonight?
Well, I'll try and do this without breaking up.
Okay.
I lost my father this January. My dad, I'm going to guess first of all, my dad was a bachelor till he was 35 years old. He married a widow with 5 children. Then they had me. 6 years after my birth, my mother passed away. Dad continued to raise all 6 of us by himself. I give you that little background to tell you when I was, I'm going to say 9 or 10, ironically, it was for hitting a girl, a neighborhood girl that lived down the street that, you know, we were roughing around, whatever. I hit her. And that is the only time that my dad, we lived in the country, sent me out to the woods to pick a switch. We've all heard the stories. And my dad tore me up. I never once in my life ever thought that my dad did not love me more than anybody in the world. And I will never think that my dad did that out of anger. My dad did that because he was disciplined. He was performing a form of corporal discipline. And he felt like what I had done had been bad enough. I received a few spankings in my life, and there is a difference between a spanking and a beating. And that time, my dad gave me a beating. That's the only time he gave it to me. It's the only time he ever had to give it to me. It's the only time I ever did anything bad enough for him to do that. But it is so important to know that I never, ever, and in the backstory of who my dad is, my dad loved us 6 kids more than anything in the world. And what he did does not in any way make him a bad person, does not in any way make him a child abuser. So that's when I have a problem with the public of perfect people giving their theologies of what we're doing in 2014 versus what we were doing in 1976. And so I'm not giving, and I know we don't want to get off on Adrian Peterson, but I'm not giving him a complete break, but I'm just asking people that to not jump to conclusions. Don't throw somebody in prison for the rest of their life because they lost it with one of their kids. If they do it one time, let's learn from it. Let's move on. I believe in corporal punishment. I don't believe in beating a child. I do have a problem with hitting a child with a switch that's 4 years old. That's a little bit of an issue. But that's the point that I want to get across. My dad did it to me one time, but there is no way that I will ever say that my dad was an abusive man or didn't love me more than the air that he breathed. And that's my point.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing your story, Philip. And I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your father. Thanks for calling in. Hi there, Mike. What's your comment tonight?
Similar to that gentleman, both my parents My mother, she, when we were little, she used to switch, and then as we got a little bit older, then my father, dealt out the discipline, which was with the belt. Neither one of them really, beat us. Just like this gentleman, I just lost my parent too, and one of the things I remember when we was at our service was that when I was little, about 4 years old, she used to keep a switch on the freezer on the back porch, and in the mind of a child, a 4-year-old, when I'd see that switch up there, I figured if I broke that switch, she could whip me because she'd have to go to the store and buy another one. And so that's kind of the mentality of a 4-year-old. They're really in the developmental stages. But the thing about, our checks and balances on child abuse, I was talking to your producer a while ago. Mm-hmm. You just run a story on the 6 o'clock news of a lady who had her children locked up in a feces-ridden room and starved them, and she was only given 2 years for human imprisonment. And, is Adrian Peterson going to get more than that for a one-time incident? The checks and balances are out of order here. I mean, this lady should be put in jail for a lot longer than 2 years. That was almost an insult. Nobody's going to learn a lesson from that because she's going to be out in less than a year probably. And Adrian Peterson is probably going to pay a lot more than that financially and with his reputation for a mistake.
Do you think, are you saying because she's a woman and a mom that she gets a lighter sentence or punishment?
And the innocence of the crime and the intention behind it. She had an intention to harm those children. She intentionally done that. This Adrian made a lot, just lost it. My parents, when they would dealt out discipline, I was telling a guy at work today, sometimes they were more mad that you put them in the situation than they were from what you did, that you forced their hand on it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Well, Mike, what do you have to say? I know we've had a lot of comments on Facebook and Twitter from people who say you should never raise a hand to your child, that's not the way to discipline kids these days. And it does seem to be more of it seems to me, a generational thing, and you can clearly see that on social media, that there's a divide between an older generation that was raised a certain way and a younger generation says, absolutely not. That's the wrong way to do it. And I'm sure you've seen that there at the Family Center.
We definitely have. We especially experienced that with the parents that we're teaching and talking to. So a lot of them say to us, they say, well, this is how I was raised, and similar to your callers, I know my parents loved me. And we're not here to disagree with that. We don't think that the parents that we serve don't love their kids. In fact, what we see is that all of them love their kids. I think the divide that you might be seeing is that there's a lot of research that's come out in the last decade especially that shows that spanking isn't the most effective way to discipline your kids. And so when we think about discipline, especially the way that we talk about it at the Family Center, we think about discipline as being positive and negative, right? It's a guidance that you're trying to give your child to help them become an effective, productive, healthy citizen when they're an adult. You're trying to get them to that place. And so a lot of times what we encourage is we encourage the adoption of many strategies that we find to be more effective because they are strategies that translate to adult life, right? Okay. So hitting, if you hit another adult to solve a problem, you're going to get in trouble, right?
Yes, you're going to create more problems.
Yeah, but if you take the time to problem solve or use other skill sets or even take a break and collect yourself, those are skills that are going to serve you well.
Okay. All right. We'll maybe talk about some of those strategies too when we come back. We're getting a lot of phone calls. You are also welcome to call in to 737+. Give us your thoughts and feedback about what's going on and maybe what you see as the line between discipline and child abuse. So stick with us and we'll be back with Jennifer in just a minute.